created a game called Crab God, and you play as a giant crab that is a god. So Crab God is a side-scrolling atmospheric strategy game. You take on the role of the colossal crab god, and you're sort of coming to the end of your life. So you need to find a replacement, and you raise a quirky colony of crabs. So it's a little bit of a tower defense strategy game, a little bit of a colony sim where you're growing this little family of crabs, and you've essentially picked one of these crabs to be your successor. So they become the sacred egg, which is the egg of the next crab god, and you got to defend that, you got to protect that, and you got to go on a little migration to collect resources in order to hatch the next crab god, who's going to then defend the oceans for years to come. So when you start out, you're in the shallow, beautiful, sunny environment. It's a little bit easier to build up your colony, gather resources, upgrade them, level them up. And then as you progress down deeper and deeper, you encounter more challenging different biomes, more threatening creatures that you've got to battle against. And if your sacred egg gets destroyed, then you've got to start again from the beginning. So there's the leveling up of your crabs with randomized sort of boons or blessings that you can get for them. And then you can get the colony-wide upgrades that are also randomized. So there's different abilities, there's different upgrades or benefits that you get. So each run is unique. Each run is slightly different, and you're really looking to hatch that next crab god. You can take on optional challenges, so it's kind of like a heat system where you, after you've completed the game once, you can play it through a couple more times after that point. So definitely looking to have interesting ways to play or make it more fun and engaging, where there's optional challenges. So there's things where it's just more difficult, or it's more chaotic, or it's easier and more peaceful and not quite as threatening. So lots of different ways to play, different gameplay difficulty modes. So you can essentially set it to cozy if you want to just have a chill experience, or you can set it to challenging if you really want to test your skills. It evolved over time. It actually first started from, I guess, more of a mechanical level. In the office, we were coming up with the idea for what do we work on next. A large portion of the design team was really inspired by God games. It's a genre that isn't commonly developed for. They're very, I'd say it's quite challenging to develop a God game. Specifically, the elements that make a God game aren't completely defined, but in general, it's things like indirect control. So you can't directly control your troops. You've got to sort of set some parameters, and they have some artificial intelligence to figure out what to do within those parameters. You've got some godly powers or some sort of blessing that you use to influence the world. And there's usually some sort of sandboxy element where you're sort of shaping the environment, or shaping the landscape. So we were inspired by those games from a mechanical and gameplay experience, games like Black and White or Reus, or games like Creatures by Maxis. So there's a pool of different games that we were originally inspired by. We are also, as a studio, really in love with the ocean. We're in love with making games about underwater environments. Coral reef ecosystems are really beautiful. I always think that it's a really good environment for games because it's so rich and complex, and there's so much reference that we can look to for a fun, interesting world. And there's different troops or different like battles that are going on between these different creatures, between these different animals. And there's this whole hierarchy, this whole pecking order that we can tap into from there. So it was sort of those two different design inspirations came together to form the original idea. And we needed some god. We needed a god to be part of this world, and we were discussing different ideas, and crabs were really the only option that we came up with. If you're thinking about like what's in the ocean that could be a god, it's like there's like whales, or maybe like giant turtles, or crabs, and it's like crabs are just so much more animated. Like they've got like the limbs, they dance, they're very expressive, so very easy to anthropomorphize and turn into this like strategy game troop that you're sort of building up the environment and all that. It was actually a working title for a really long time. Like the original game design, we were like, oh yeah, it's a god game with crab in there, or like god game inspired with crab in there. And yeah, we'll definitely come up with a better name later. And then like throughout development, we kept on revisiting it. And we're like, yeah, we've got all these like different ideas and interesting ideas, but like Crab God's pretty good. Like it does what it says on the tin. I'd say the strongest influence is actually a game called Kingdom, Kingdom Two Crowns, where I think the simplicity of the strategy and the immersion that you get from the environmental storytelling or the lack of user interface, and you just really connect with the world. Like, despite it being a very simple game on the surface, myself and some of the other design team were really drawn in by how engaged we can be in these games, in these simple experiences. So that's definitely one of the strongest influences. So Crab God has a similar day-night system, a similar side-scrolling camera perspective, and you're sort of choosing where to invest your single resource to build up the environment, defend against threats, and there's that roguelike element to Kingdom as well. There's a game, Rius 2 was recently released and has been published by our publisher Firesquid. But Rios was a design inspiration where it's a god game where you build up the environment, and depending on how you shape the environment, you essentially have civilization grow and develop around that. So that was one of the initial design inspirations. I think as the development process went on, we started drawing more and more from a game called Viva Pinata. Myself and the other two co-founders of the company have a real soft spot for Viva Pinata. I don't know, it's just it's such a it's a very unique game, like, compared to everything else I've played, but it's so inviting, it's playful, but it also feels like it doesn't take itself too seriously, and like, I don't know, it's ridiculously cute, but also, like, I don't know, being a grown man, I love it. I'm more than willing to sing its praises. So I think if I had to describe the game to somebody, I'd say it's like Kingdom Two Crowns meets Viva Pinata. It's probably the strongest comparison. And yeah, Viva Pinata as a game, we've always been really interested in it and looking to figure out a way to integrate it more into some of our projects. And as I said, as the game evolved over the course of development, it became more and more integral. I think that the way that they have the requirement system, where you're sort of building up a food web and have sort of hidden requirements for creatures that get revealed over time. So there's an element of exploration, of discovery, were all elements that were really resonating with players, that players wanted to see more of. So just more and more of that got integrated into the game. It hasn't been as straightforward as some other projects, and I think that it's for a few reasons. One of them being God games as a genre being quite challenging to develop for. I mentioned that briefly earlier. I've read some analysis online that talks about how God games, they used to be very popular, and then they dropped off in popularity in favor of things like management sims or colony sims. One of the reasons that the community is theorizing that they've become less popular is because player agency and player control is so important in games. And in older video games where they were simpler, or we didn't have as much game literacy, we didn't have as much computing power, as much mechanics and systems that we could access, those simpler experiences where it is a little bit more hands-off, it is indirect control, were more enjoyable or more approachable. And one of the things that we found really challenging early on was, or throughout the entire development process, was really balancing indirect control. So how much control do we give the player? Through a lot of playtesting, we received feedback quite often that people wanted more control, people wanted to micromanage. I want my crabs to stand here, to stand there. And one of our design pillars has always been indirect control. So it was this push and pull between putting in features to give the player more control without making it micromanaging. We really wanted that sense of immersion and that sense of paying attention to the ecosystem rather than just the individual crabs. So in Crab God, you assign roles to your crabs, and then you queue up actions, and then the crabs will sort of figure out what to do. So they figure out where to stand, where to move, what resources to pick up, and where to go next. So I think the final result, the final system that we came out with, is really good and does achieve that really nice balance of allows you to set out a broad strategy that you want to accomplish, and then your crabs will figure out the rest. But it took us I'd say 3 iterations of the core gameplay loop to get there. The very first iteration, we didn't have roles, and crabs were sort of just figuring out what to do on their own, but then there wasn't enough control there. Second iteration, we gave players a lot more control, and they could pick up crabs and move them around. They could tell crabs to do specific actions, but it just led to the gameplay experience being very focused on actions per minute. So how fast can I move? How fast can I react? Which wasn't the experience that we wanted to create. And then this final version that we've delivered is what we're really happy with, which is assigning roles and that broad strategy, feeling really connected to the environment, to the big picture strategy, and just being immersed in the game. One of my favorite things about the game is we've got a system where we're donating 10% of the game's funds towards ocean conservation. So players, as they play through the game, they can unlock opportunities to vote where those funds go. So they can choose to send funds towards saving baby sea turtles, or cleaning up ocean plastic, or preserving marine parklands. So there's a number of different actions that they can essentially vote for. And I think that the way that we've involved the player in that decision-making journey is one of my favorite parts about the game, because I think it's great. There are a couple of games that have done a similar system, like Alba or Terra Nil, where they've donated 10% of the revenue of the game towards these charitable organizations, which is great. I love it. I think one of the benefits of games is that we're a medium where we're interactive. We can involve the player, and I think it's a missed opportunity to not let people choose where those funds go, to involve people in the journey of like, I feel like I've made a difference. I bought this game. I get to choose where this goes. So I think that's something that I'm really happy about. So we're continuing to maintain and support the game. There's a few additional features that we're working on. We actually received a grant from Unity. It's the Unity for Humanity grant, which allowed us to essentially expand some of the environmental conservation features that are in the game. So one of the final big features that we're developing is tracking the carbon emissions from players. So we're looking at playtime and average energy usage in areas around the world, and then using that to calculate what's the energy footprint of everybody playing the game, and then using that 10% of the game's revenue to offset all those emissions from everybody playing. So that's one of the big features. So we're continuing to maintain and support what we have, and hopefully with the support of the community, we'll be able to work on the next iteration of Crab God for whatever platform that is.
What's your go-to caffeinated beverage when working on the game, if you've got one?
Black coffee. Like I'm lactose intolerant. I drank I don't know, lattes, and then soy lattes, and then almond lattes. But I think just cut out all of the fluff and just get straight to the source. I think black coffee, you can drink a lot of it, and it doesn't make you feel sick at all, and you can just keep on going throughout the day. And but yeah, it's clean burning.